Hi, my name's Anna Serin. I'm Director of Listings Development with the Canadian Securities Exchange, and you're joining us for yet another market recap on Friday, October 29th. I am, of course, joined by my wonderful co-host, Bruce Campbell with StoneCastle Investment Management. Thank you for joining me, Bruce.
Yeah, it's good to be back after a couple of weeks off, right?
Neither of us are wearing Halloween costumes, which should be what's happening on the Friday before Halloween. So we'll just have to go as our scary selves.
Right.
Okay, so listen, we missed last week. So we are actually going to try and break down as fast as we can what happened in 2 weeks, because there's some stuff that happened last week that we have to talk about. So we're going to talk about what happened in the Canadian markets this week. There was a lot going on. You're going to talk about breadth improving. The TSX ends a 14-day winning streak. We're going to talk about an announcement that came from Bank of Canada, and then we're going to get into some fun stuff. So Tesla hit the $1 trillion market cap. We're going to talk about that and a deal that was announced this week with Hertz. We're going to talk about Facebook. It changed its name, its parent company name, to Meta. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about DWAC. If you don't know what DWAC is, we're going to explain it to you, but you should know by now. And then, of course, we're going to get into some CSE issuer news. There's some fun stuff happening on the CSE. So first, let's talk about the Canadian markets. There's a lot to talk about here. We'll start with breadth improving. What's happening there?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this and we've sort of telegraphed this over the last 2 months on the show here. But what we've slowly seen is that, that breadth that was really strong in January, February of this year, and then started to deteriorate, it started to improve again. So if you look at the RRG that we have up here right now, what we're seeing is that the TSX and the S&P amount of stocks that are above their 50-day moving average is improving and continues to improve, and it's in the RRG improving quadrant. And then if you look at the amount of stocks that are over their 200-day, both for the TSX and the S&P, that's also improving. So what you saw, through most of the summer was that it was really kind of the largest companies that were the ones that were leading the way. And now we're starting to see investors looking down market cap, digging a little bit deeper, trying to figure out where there's other opportunities. So anytime we see that in the market, that's certainly positive, and that's what we want to see. So it's great. And obviously the TSX hit record high on Monday of this week, and then the S&P, depending on where it closes today, I think it was the 56th record high of the year yesterday for the S&P. So we might hit 57 today.
Crazy. Okay. And then what happened with the Bank of Canada making an announcement?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually, it's been pretty well broadcast what they did, and there's been a lot of people looking at it that maybe they're leading the way as far as what they've done. But they left interest rates where they were, but they announced that they're going to finish their quantitative easing program now, and that they're only going to be buying back replacement bonds. So when something matures, then they'll look at entering the market, and that's it. And so, of course, that's really been a lot of the liquidity that's been fueling the market, maybe not so much in Canada, but certainly in the US. And, I heard a lot of commentary this week about the fact that, now that Canada's done this, is that the direction that the US goes and really picks up the pace of what they were doing. The US has already announced that they're going to be cutting back their quantitative easing, but, it's such a large number as it is that it still has a huge impact, but maybe they accelerate that. And of course, if they do, that's probably not something the market's going to stand up and cheer. It's probably the opposite of that. It's going to probably be very tentative about what that means and how much liquidity there'll be in the markets.
Okay, so just to break this down for people, the reason that they're doing this is because they feel that we have hit some economic recovery. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, obviously they put all these measures in place in sort of the real darkest days of COVID in order to try to stimulate the economy, help the markets, and and just put cash out in there into businesses and into people's hands. And now that we're seeing some recovery, both from a COVID perspective, from an economic perspective, they just feel it's not necessary anymore.
Yeah, it's like tapering off your children's weekly allowance because they're starting to work on their own. They don't like it, but we see that they're capable, so we're gonna ease it down. So that's essentially what's happening there. So it is a good sign, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the markets react because they're not going to have as much liquidity pouring in from the government. Okay, let's talk about Tesla. So Tesla announced a pretty big transaction that occurred this week. Hertz, the rental car company, announced that they are going to buy 100,000 Teslas in the next 14 months that they will use as a car that you can rent. So when you go and rent your car, you can now rent a Tesla. This transaction, I believe, is $4.2 billion was the amount of the transaction. It was 100,000 vehicles that they've committed to buy over the next 14 months. So this helped the Tesla stock climb. I think it was about 12% that it climbed. I always find this interesting. This helped Mr. Musk increase his wealth to 230 billion. Poor guy. Okay, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of different things that happened. Obviously, one that was interesting was Tesla increased more market share than a lot of other car companies have market share. So like they increased by like a Ford or by a GM on the day, even bigger in some cases. That's one. The second is obviously it had a fairly significant impact, and it's not a small contract. But I saw somebody make the point that, well, how many Toyotas would someone like Hertz have in their fleet? It would probably be well over 100,000. So it's obviously a great announcement, and keeps the Tesla stock rolling, no pun intended. But it's one of those ones that's right now, it's certainly a market darling, and you sort of wonder at what point in time does all this gamma engineering with the stock come to an end.
Okay, so you bring up a good point there. So talking about the Toyotas that might be in the fleet of Hertz, when Tesla reaches this, and remind me, I think there's only a few out there that are kind of in that $1 trillion market cap. Is a pretty private club there, right?
It sure is, yeah.
So they've reached this, but the fundamentals don't necessarily match kind of the market cap that they're at. So it'll be interesting to see what's your view on this as a fund manager. Is this something that you'd be a little bit nervous about?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the price momentum's been really strong all this year, but obviously with the challenges matching up where their business is versus what their valuation is, and again, when you compare them to other businesses that car companies that have been around for a lot longer, the valuation is kind of off the charts high. And to believe that, Ford or General Motors or, Toyota isn't going to be coming full charge at them with electric vehicles is kind of foolish to think. So, I've seen a lot of commentary, and obviously this commentary has been wrong because they've been saying it since probably $400 on Tesla, that it was overvalued and that it was going to have a huge drop, and it still hasn't. And there's a lot of people that are anticipating that when the air starts to come out of it, it could have a fairly significant correction.
Right. Well, it'll be interesting to watch that play out. Hertz is also committing to helping build the network of charging stations. I think in general, that's probably a really good thing. So it'll be interesting. Hertz is obviously reinventing itself a little bit. Always interesting to watch that happen, how that's going to play out. So we'll continue to watch. Facebook changed its name. Now, just to be clear, this is the parent name that it's changed, and it's changed it to Meta. Our producer, James Black, has been talking to me, funny enough, this week or the past few weeks about metaverse. So the reason that he changed it is because he's saying, look, we're not just Facebook. We have a bunch of other applications that we do that are, outside of Facebook. So really trying to, create the brand of who they are outside of just Facebook. It's interesting that this happened alongside the whistleblower coming out a few weeks ago, pointing their finger at Facebook for maybe some not great practices. I just want to explain this before I ask you about it. Metaverse, it refers to efforts to combine virtual and augmented reality technologies in a new online realm. So this is really, they think this is going to be the next internet, the metaverse, where we will live and interact in these online realities, whether it's through headsets or on our computer or on our phones or whatever that might be, and live in this other reality. So that's what metaverse is. That's what people are, proposing as the next internet. What do you think about this name change, and how did the market react?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of other cross currents at Facebook/metaverse that, are probably in a lot of cases more important than this. But it's a little bit like when Google changed their name to Alphabet. Most people still kind of refer to it as Google, even though it's Alphabet now. So I suspect that it'll take a while before Facebook is, fully sort of accepted and named Metaverse. Not that it's even, I don't think they've changed the symbol yet. I don't think that happens until December, if I understand correctly. So it'll be a ways away before that's changed. And then obviously it'll be a legacy that, is carried on for a long time. But it makes sense. Obviously, their business is way more than just Facebook, and they're obviously trying to really promote that they're taking things in a new direction.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting. I bet there's lots of plans on the horizon for a bunch of other stuff that they're going to bring to market, and this is probably the beginning of that all. I don't think it was a cheap rebranding, by the way. I didn't get an actual quote anywhere, but I think this was a very expensive venture for him. So hopefully it's worthwhile. Okay, we're going to talk about DWAC. It's whack with the D. Okay, DWAC is Digital World Acquisition Corp. It is a SPAC that completed an acquisition. Just to remind you all, just in case you don't remember, a SPAC is a special purpose acquisition corporation. It is a blank check company where funds are raised into a company with the purpose of going out to acquire an asset. This particular SPAC acquired the Trump social media universe. So the Trump Media and Technology Group, it's not active at this point. It is a wait list of people wanting to participate. So I'm not sure what was acquired. I'm sure that there were some assets acquired, but really it's a wait list of him going out and creating his own social media platform. This will include a streaming service where he can have non-woke material, whatever that means, as well as a social media network where people, and don't forget, he was banned from Twitter and Facebook in January for what happened on Capitol Hill. So he has done this special purpose acquisition corp. Now, Bruce, correct me if I'm wrong, but all of these go to market at $10. Is that right? When they're initially put together, they're $10 a share, right?
I don't think that they have to, but that's been the formula. Yeah. So they go to $10 and they have so it's usually a unit. So there's a stock and a warrant that's attached and it goes to market at $10.
And SPACs are something that traditionally we've seen in the US a lot, but we're starting to see them in Canada. They're typically, when you see them on the uprise, it's typically a sign of a very strong market, because the fact that they can go and raise $40 million as a blank company without any asset in it to go and acquire an asset, is usually a good sign of a market where there's money flowing at them. This started out at $10, and last week, so we didn't have last week, but I think at the end of the week, what did it close at? Do you remember?
It was in the 120s, I believe.
Unbelievable. Now it's taken a hit this week. He has come out further. There was a press release he came out that did hurt it a little bit. I think it's around $60 now. Still a decent upswing for those that got in early. But it's already started. You can kind of see it. He's come out with a press release, and I was going to read part of the press release, but to be honest, it's gibberish, I think. So I didn't think I would ruin our market recap with some of that. But I got to say, I'm really intrigued by this. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think this is going to be huge?
Well, I mean, the interesting thing that I took from it was last week when, sort of trading exploded on it. I believe there's less than 40 million shares outstanding. And on one day, it traded over 800 million shares. So you can see the volume of trading that happened on the stock. It's kind of off the charts crazy.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because I think there's also a portion of this that we talk about that is relating to Wall Street bets, right? This was essentially a bit of a meme play again, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was for sure. Yeah.
So what do you think that did for GameStop and some of the other stocks that this group has got a strong hold over? Did they all leave those stocks to jump into DWAC?
I didn't look that closely. It's very possible. I think that they've sort of already transitioned themselves from some of those stocks into other areas, because it seems like there's kind of one a week or a couple a week that seem to be on the forefront. Maybe not as big as some of those others were in the past, like GameStop or AMC, but I think this one's probably the biggest as far as volume goes.
Well, I did read somewhere, I was trying to find today what it was at, but last week the wait list for his social media platform was millions and millions and millions of people. So it will definitely gain a lot of attention. I think that there's a lot of supporters that he has in the US and across the globe. So it'll be interesting to watch this come to market. So we will continue to watch that stock. We're going to talk about some CSE issuer news. One thing I wanted to talk about, we had some really neat stuff that happened on the market or on the CSE this week, but I saw a few things come to market that I thought were interesting, and I wanted to ask you. So we have a new issuer that listed with us on October 18th, I believe, Gilliam Resources. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I know some of the people that are involved in that. They're great market people. They've been around for a long time, and they have acquired a property that is in the Braylorn Bridge River Gold District. I know that area well. It is a huge historical part of BC's history in mining in that district. And I know there's a few other companies around there. Talisker, which was with us when they started before they went to the big board, they're out in that area. So that's a really neat area for them to be active. It's gold producing or historical gold producers as well. Another one of our companies, Appia Rare Earth and Uranium Corp. They came out and announced a $6 million bought deal. And I think it's same day or next day, they came out and said, actually, we've upsized it to 7 million. There's so much interest. They're based out of at the Athabasca Basin, obviously involved in exploration for uranium. And that was done by Red Cloud Security. So I'm bringing these two up because we don't talk about mining and exploration that often, Bruce, but what's your thoughts on what's going on in junior exploration right now, and more specifically in Canada? It seems like things are really happening.
Yeah, we rank with our part of our asset leadership model, we rank country ETFs to see who has the strongest relative strength. And Canada's really been surging up the charts this entire year. And there's really two factors, well, three, I guess, two direct factors and one indirect, which would be energy, materials. And then the indirect is, when both those do well, the banks typically do well in Canada. And so, we actually believe that maybe we've started a whole new commodity cycle here again. If you look at, go back in history, back in 99, technology in the US peaked out. And at that point in time, Canada started a commodity cycle. Well, the US technology sold off. And over the next 10 years, we saw, fantastic returns on the TSX. Well, the S&P was mostly flat. In the last 10 years, we've really seen, the S&P outperform Canada. Most investors you talk to have a big US exposure. Most professional investors that you speak to have a higher US exposure than they do even Canada. And so, it would kind of make sense from a contrarian standpoint that all of a sudden Canada was to make a move. And obviously what ends up happening typically is that, the big stuff moves first, and then people start to look down cap to figure out, who has the next greatest opportunity as far as, discovery and building a mine. So, we could have quite a bright future here for the next decade in Canada with mining for sure.
Well, and I think it was interesting too, the CSE, we put together a forum last year called Mining Over Canada. It was super interesting just to learn what was going on across the country because it's so diverse, our landscape. But the one thing that was, that came out of the pandemic is that people couldn't fly to other countries necessarily and get teams in place. But in Canada, people were still able to be active on their drill programs. So it allowed us to carry forward. The Canadian mining landscape is unbelievable. It's huge, and there's lots of opportunity. So I'm always excited when I see that happening. Okay, Bruce, what should we think about going into next week?
Well, the biggest thing is, we've talked a lot about seasonality. We're through that, weakest period, and now we're starting to head into the positive period. November's been, a very positive market. I think in the last 10 years, the S&P has been positive all 10 of those. It'll be interesting to see kind of what happens this year. October's been a fairly strong month, and generally it's not as strong. And so, we'll see if we can make it 11 in a row, or if it's going to go the opposite way. But we are in that strongest seasonality period. So calendar rolls over, and we're in November next week.
We're in November next week. And typically is November. I mean, the markets have been pretty interesting to watch over the past few weeks. Do you continue to see a lot happening in November before maybe it quiets down a bit at the end of the year?
Yeah, the Americans basically have 3 weeks before their Thanksgiving to get everything jammed in. So it tends to be a little bit frantic. In Canada here, we have a little bit longer. It tends to be kind of the middle of December when everything just shuts right down.
And people can enjoy the holidays. Well, listen, Bruce, it was lovely to chat with you. I missed you last week and happy to be back at it. We will be chatting next week. Have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.